The disappearance of Madeleine McCann is one of the most famous unsolved missing person cases in modern history. Madeleine was a 3-year-old British girl who vanished on May 3, 2007, while on holiday with her family. Nearly 2 decades later, the case remains officially unsolved, leaving a trail of questions that still haunt the world today. Madeleine Beth McCann was born on May 12, 2003 in Leicester, England, to parents Kate and Jerry McCann. In May 2007, the family traveled to the Ocean Club Resort in Portugal with friends and Madeleine's younger twin siblings. They stayed in apartment 5A, a location that would soon become the center of a global investigation. The night Madeleine disappeared followed a routine evening for the McCanns and their group of friends. The adults dined at a tapas restaurant roughly 50 to 100 meters from their holiday apartment. Madeleine and the twins were left asleep. The adults reportedly checked on them periodically throughout the evening. Around 10 p.m., Kate McCann discovered Madeleine missing. The apartment window and shutters were said to be wide open. The early Portuguese investigation faced heavy criticism for how the scene was handled in those critical first hours. The apartment was not sealed quickly enough. Tourists and staff walked through, leading to possible forensic contamination. In 2007, Kate and Jerry were named formal suspects, but no charges followed, and the status was lifted a year later. British sniffer dogs later alerted to areas inside the apartment and the McCann's rental car, sparking fresh debate. While some believed this suggested a death had occurred, no body was found and DNA evidence remained inconclusive. Over the years, 2 main theories have dominated the public and professional discourse on the case. The first is the abduction theory. Investigators looked into opportunistic kidnapping or a planned predator strike. The second theory, promoted by former detective Gonzalo Amaral, suggested an accident occurred within the apartment. In 2011, the Metropolitan Police launched Operation Grange, a multi-million-pound review of the entire case. British investigators focused on the possibility of a burglary gone wrong or a predator operating in the area. In 2020, German prosecutors identified a prime suspect, a German national named Christian Bruckner. Bruckner was a convicted sex offender who lived in Praia da Luz and worked odd jobs around the resort in 2007. Phone records allegedly placed him near the resort on the very night Madeleine vanished from her room. German authorities stated they believed Madeleine was dead, though much of their evidence remains under wraps. Major searches have continued into 2024, including at reservoirs and sites Bruckner was known to frequent. Despite these massive efforts, no confirmed breakthrough has been announced to the public. In late 2025, Bruckner was released from prison after serving a separate sentence, but remains under close surveillance. Authorities in Germany and the UK continue to explore legal avenues as the investigation remains active. The case changed how missing child investigations are handled globally and remains a symbol of every parent's worst nightmare. As of May 2026, Madeleine McCann has never been found. The search for the truth continues, nearly 20 years later.
The West Mesa Bone Collector is the nickname given to an unknown killer connected to one of the most disturbing, unsolved cases in modern history. In February 2009, a woman walking her dog in the desert on Albuquerque's West Mesa discovered a human bone sticking out of the ground. Police searches uncovered a mass burial site containing the remains of 11 women and an unborn child. Most victims disappeared between 2001 and 2005, many of whom were living vulnerable lifestyles that the killer likely targeted. The strongest theory involves Lorenzo Montoya, a violent man who died in 2006, though no direct forensic evidence officially tied him to all the murders. The case remains officially unsolved, making it one of the largest serial murder investigations in US history. The search for justice continues for the families of the West Mesa. Thank you for watching.
Shocking news is emerging from Dubai this week, involving reality star Katie Price and her husband, Lee Andrews. Price has gone public with claims that Andrews has been reported missing in the UAE, sparking international headlines. The star says she hasn't had any contact with him for over a week and his family is growing desperate. The details shared by Price regarding their last interaction are truly chilling. She claims the last time they spoke was via FaceTime on May 13th, a call that left her deeply unsettled. According to Price, Lee appeared distressed during the call and claimed he was being held against his will. He allegedly told her he had been detained in a van somewhere near the border between Dubai and Oman. This remote location has become the focus of intense speculation as the search for answers continues. Soon after that final call, Price says his phone location stopped updating entirely. Since then, neither she nor his family have been able to establish any form of communication. Official channels have now been activated to investigate the disappearance. Andrews' family reportedly filed an official missing person report with the British Embassy in Dubai. The UK Foreign Office has since confirmed they are providing support to the family of a British national. They are working with local authorities in the UAE to gather more information on his whereabouts. However, the story takes a complicated turn as conflicting reports begin to surface. Some media outlets and investigative journalists have suggested a different narrative entirely. There are suggestions that Andrews may not be missing or kidnapped in the way Price describes. Some sources hint that he could be deliberately avoiding contact for personal or legal reasons. Specifically, allegations regarding financial disputes have started to cloud the investigation. Fraud claims have been mentioned in several reports, though Andrews has previously denied such allegations. Could he be keeping a low profile to navigate these legal and financial challenges? This complexity has left the public and media outlets divided on what the truth actually is. Is this a genuine case of kidnapping or a calculated disappearance amidst mounting pressure? Katie Price remains adamant that her husband is in grave danger and needs immediate help. For now, the authorities are continuing to treat the situation as a missing person investigation. The drama continues to unfold in the heart of Dubai, with the world watching for a resolution. To summarize, Katie Price is convinced her husband has been abducted and is fighting for his return. Officials have acknowledged the case and are providing support to the family during this time. But the actual truth remains obscured by layers of contradictory media reports and legal rumors. We will keep you updated as this story develops and more concrete information becomes available.
2026. A pop star's life hangs in the balance. Jack Avery had a target on his back. A custody battle with Gabriela Gonzalez spiraled into pure malice. The plan? Hire a hitman to eliminate the problem once and for all. Kai Caudry used the alias Lizard King 69 to recruit a killer in the shadows. But the killer was an FBI agent. The trap was set. The Bureau was watching. Gabriela's father, attorney Francisco Gonzalez, is accused of funding the gamble. May 2026, the hammer drops. Arrests, conspiracy, solicitation, betrayal. Now they face decades in a cage. The most twisted influencer crime ever. Presumed innocent, but the evidence is terrifying. Justice is coming. For Avery, the nightmare is over. The trial begins now. Stay tuned.
Singer D4VD, known legally as David Burke, has been arrested and charged with the first-degree murder of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. The charges follow a months-long investigation that began after Celeste was identified in September 2025 as the decomposed and dismembered body found inside a Tesla registered to the singer. Here's a look at the timeline of the case. D4VD and Celeste first meet in January 2022, when Celeste is just 11 years old. By November 2023, prosecutors alleged the pair began a sexual relationship. Celeste was just 13, D4VD was 18. In February 2024, Celeste, a then 13-year-old 7th grader, is reported missing by her family from her Lake Elsinore home. Celeste returns to her Lake Elsinore home 2 days later. The Riverside County Sheriff's Office reportedly calls D4VD after they identified his phone number in Celeste's phone records. He allegedly tells deputies he last talked to Celeste on February 13 or 14, but he claims he didn't know she was a minor and didn't know she had been reported missing. He told deputies he'd only met her once. Celeste returned home 2 days later, but the secret communication didn't stop. Prosecutors allege that D4VD paid a junior high school student in Celeste's class $1,000 to give her a cell phone that he had purchased so they could keep talking. The pair then spent a significant amount of time together in 2024, including weekends at his home in the Hollywood Hills, and traveling to Las Vegas, London, and even to Texas to meet D4VD's family, prosecutors say. In April 2024, Celeste went missing again. By November, the pair reportedly broke up but continued communicating, and prosecutors say their texts suggest they also continued to have a sexual relationship. Prosecutors say a text sent from Celeste to D4VD says, "Rats, all we do is have sex and just hang out, man. I want more than that for myself." On April 22, 2025, D4VD and Celeste reportedly get into a lengthy argument in which Celeste threatens to disclose information about their relationship to end D4VD's career and destroy his life. The next day, D4VD sent an Uber to pick Celeste up from her Lake Elsinore home and bring her to his house around 8:40 p.m. Celeste reportedly arrives around 10:10 p.m. Prosecutors allege that shortly after she arrived, D4VD stabbed Celeste multiple times and watched her bleed to death. Celeste was officially released to her family for memorial services in September 2025. D4VD allegedly sends fake texts to her phone to create an alibi, even as he drives to Santa Barbara that night. Prosecutors believe the texts were part of a premeditated plan to cover up her murder. While Celeste lay dead, D4VD went to a radio interview to promote his debut studio album, Withered. The music video for the song One More Dance depicts D4VD placing a bloodied body into the trunk of a car. His debut studio album, Withered, was released on April 25, 2025. D4VD orders a shovel, chainsaws, and body bags on Amazon using a fake name. Prosecutors believe he was already planning to hide the evidence. Prosecutors believe Celeste's body was mutilated on May 5th. Her remains were dismembered, and 2 of her fingers were never recovered. Set 8, 2025, a 2023 Tesla Model Y, registered to D4VD, is towed from an upscale Hollywood Hills neighborhood where it appears abandoned. At a tow yard, LAPD investigators find a cadaver bag in the vehicle's front trunk. The remains were identified as Celeste Rivas Hernandez from dental records belonging to the victim. Investigators say Celeste has an index finger tattoo reading "shh," similar to a tattoo D4VD has. Police found blood inside the garage matching the teen's DNA. D4VD cancelled the remaining dates of his tour as the investigation escalated. Law enforcement sources tell Eyewitness News that D4VD is now considered a suspect. The medical examiner rules Celeste's death was a homicide caused by 2 penetrating injuries to the torso. D4VD's parents, Colleen and Dawood Burke, are subpoenaed to testify before a Los Angeles grand jury regarding Celeste's death. Meanwhile, Celeste's passport card is found by a Caltrans worker in the same area D4VD had previously visited. D4VD is arrested on April 16, 2026, in connection with the murder of Celeste Rivas Hernandez. He is held without bail at LAPD's 77th Street station. D4VD is formally charged with first-degree murder, continuous sexual acts, lewd and lascivious sexual acts with an individual under 14 years old, and mutilating the human remains of a body. He makes his first court appearance and pleads not guilty to the charges. Prosecutors claim a significant amount of child pornography was found in the singer's cell phone. D4VD has pleaded not guilty to all charges. Prosecutors say lengthy investigations by the LAPD and DA's office resulted in gathering more than 40 terabytes of data. It's unclear what type of evidence they hold. A preliminary hearing is tentatively scheduled for May 4. That's when evidence and testimony will be presented to show a judge that there is enough evidence to move to trial. The date has now been moved to June 29th. As the legal battle continues, Celeste's family says all they want is justice for a girl who loved to sing and dance.
The Lindsay Shiver case, a story that gripped the world, blending wealth, scandal, and a shocking alleged plot. Who is Lindsay Shiver? Once an Auburn beauty queen and cheerleader, she became the center of an international crime investigation. Known for her high-profile lifestyle, she was accused in a shocking murder-for-hire plot targeting her estranged husband. Her husband, Robert Shiver, was a former football player and insurance executive. The case exploded online for its cinematic twists. It combined wealth, privilege, an alleged affair, and a plot uncovered in the tropical backdrop of the Bahamas. Many compared it to a movie. Publicly, the Shivers appeared to have a picture-perfect life. Luxury vacations, expensive homes, and a beautiful family. They were well known in social circles connected to Auburn University, but behind the scenes, prosecutors say the marriage was collapsing. As divorce tensions escalated, investigators alleged that Lindsay began a serious relationship with a man from the Bahamas. His name was Terrence Bethel. Authorities claimed the relationship became serious, and conversations allegedly turned toward violence. The affair angle became one of the biggest drivers of the online fascination that surrounded the case. So, how was it discovered? Belle Gunness, the Black Widow of LaPorte. Belle Gunness is considered one of the most terrifying female serial killers in American history, and one of the few who may have successfully disappeared forever. Born in Norway in 1859 as Brynhild Paulsdatter Sturseth, she emigrated to the United States in the 1880s and eventually settled near LaPorte. What made her case so disturbing wasn't just the murders, it was how methodical and financially motivated they were. A pattern of suspicious deaths. Before the mass graves were discovered, people around Belle had already been dying mysteriously. Her first husband, Mads Sorensen, he died in 1900 under highly suspicious circumstances. According to reports, he became violently ill after returning home. Wald, Belle claimed he died of heart failure. His death occurred on the exact day two life insurance policies overlapped. Belle collected a large payout. Even more suspicious, several of the couple's children had previously died mysteriously. Those deaths also resulted in insurance claims. At the time, poisoning was difficult to prove because forensic toxicology barely existed. The death of Peter Gunnis Bell later married widower Peter Gunnis. Only months later, he allegedly died when a sausage grinder fell from a shelf and crushed his skull. Many investigators believed the story was impossible. After Peter's death, Bell inherited his property. She purchased a large, isolated farm. The killings escalated dramatically. Bell began placing newspaper ads targeting lonely middle-aged men. The advertisements promised romance, marriage, a stable farm life. She specifically encouraged men to bring cash, sell their property before arriving, come alone. Several wealthy suitors disappeared after visiting her farm. Families became suspicious because letters suddenly stopped, men vanished without collecting belongings, bank accounts were emptied. The farm of horrors. In 1908, the brother of missing victim Andrew Helgelian arrived searching for answers. Soon afterward, Bell's farmhouse burned to the ground. Inside the ruins, her 3 children were found dead. A headless female body was discovered. Authorities initially assumed the corpse was Bell, but there was a problem. The body appeared much smaller than Bell, lacked clear identification, was badly burned. Then investigators began digging around the farm. What they uncovered shocked the country. Human remains buried everywhere. Police discovered dismembered bodies, skeletons, body parts wrapped in sacks, remains buried in hog pens. Some victims had been chopped apart, burned, fed to pigs. The total number of victims remains unknown. Estimates range from 14 confirmed victims to over 40 possible murders. Audos. Did Bell fake her death? Bell's farmhand, Ray Lamphere, was arrested after the fire. Later, he allegedly confessed that Bell murdered numerous men. She used another woman's corpse as a decoy. She staged the fire herself. She escaped before the blaze. This theory became legendary because no one could ever conclusively prove the body was Bell. There were later reported sightings of her across the United States, but none were verified. Why the case still fascinates people. Belle Gunness became infamous because she shattered stereotypes of the era. At the time, many people struggled to believe a woman could physically overpower victims, dismember bodies, run a long-term killing operation, yet witnesses described her as extremely strong, intimidating, emotionally cold, highly manipulative. The mystery surrounding her disappearance only deepened the legend. Some historians believe she died in the fire. Others think she escaped with thousands of dollars stolen from her victims and lived under a false identity for years. To this day, nobody knows for certain what happened to her.
The Bell Witch legend is one of the oldest and most terrifying supernatural stories in American history. A haunting so famous it became part of Southern folklore, paranormal culture, and horror cinema. The haunting centered around farmer John Bell and his family on their prosperous frontier farm in 1817. The entity became known as the Bell Witch, and it allegedly called itself Kate. His daughter Betsy was slapped by invisible hands and dragged from her bed by screaming voices. The spirit appeared to hate John Bell specifically, subjecting him to violent choking fits. In 1820, a mysterious vial appeared. The spirit claimed responsibility for John Bell's death. Today, the Bell Witch Cave remains one of America's most famous haunted tourist sites. It inspired an American haunting and remains a pillar of Southern Gothic horror. That uncertainty is why the Bell Witch remains one of the most chilling stories ever told.
Corey Richins was a Utah real estate agent, influencer-style entrepreneur, and self-published children's author. Her husband, Eric Richins, died suddenly in March 2022. At first, his death appeared natural, but over time, investigators uncovered evidence that transformed the case into one of America's most shocking killer spouse stories. The case exploded online because of her children's book, fentanyl poisoning allegations, and claims of financial motive. March 4th, 2022, Camas, Utah. The couple were living in a luxury home near Camas. According to prosecutors, Corey prepared Eric a celebratory drink after a house deal closing. Eric later became violently ill. He was found dead in bed during the night. Corey called 911 claiming she believed her husband had suffered a medical emergency, but the autopsy revealed something unexpected. Medical examiners discovered Eric had 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl in his system. Investigators immediately became suspicious because Eric had no known fentanyl addiction and was cautious around drugs. Authorities later alleged Corey had secretly obtained fentanyl from a dealer to poison Eric's drink. After Eric's death, Corey self-published a children's book called Are You With Me? The book focused on helping children cope with grief and maintaining an emotional connection after losing a loved one. She promoted the book publicly in interviews and local TV appearances, playing the role of a grieving widow. When prosecutors later charged her with murder, the public reaction was massive and horrified. Online commenters described it as chilling, calculated, and unbelievable. The contrast between her grieving widow image and the murder allegations drove enormous social media attention. Prosecutors claimed the marriage had serious financial problems, with Corey allegedly carrying large debts. There were disputes over money, and Eric had reportedly changed his will before his death, fearing he was being poisoned. One of the biggest revelations was that this was not the first attempt. Corey allegedly tried poisoning him on Valentine's Day. Eric became severely ill after a dinner, but survived. Investigators later connected that incident to the murder. Investigators uncovered messages allegedly discussing fentanyl purchases, deleting evidence, and financial concerns. The prosecution argued these messages showed preparation, intent, and a consciousness of guilt. The defense challenged the interpretation of these messages and pointed to gaps in the direct evidence. The case became one of the most watched trials in America, exploding across TikTok, YouTube, and court TV. In 2026, Corey Richins was convicted of aggravated murder, attempted murder, and fraud-related offenses. The conviction shocked many viewers, and sentencing details became national headlines due to the high-profile nature of the trial. The case went viral because of the chilling book angle, the perfect family facade, and the true crime social media obsession. As of 2026, Corey Richins remains incarcerated in Utah. Appeals are expected as the case continues to generate discussion. The story remains a haunting reminder of the mix of family tragedy, financial motive, and deep deception. The Mackenzie Sherilla case, full breakdown. This is the story of a tragedy that shocked the internet and divided the public. Who was involved? At the center was 17-year-old Mackenzie Sherilla, her boyfriend Dominic Russo, and their friend Davion Flanagan. The case became one of the most controversial true crime stories online because prosecutors claimed the crash was not an accident, but an intentional murder-suicide attempt. It happened in the early hours of July 31st, 2022 in Strongsville, Ohio. Sherilla was driving a Toyota Camry with Russo and Flanagan as passengers after the group had spent time together earlier that night. Drugs, including psilocybin mushrooms, were later found connected to the vehicle, adding another layer to the investigation. Surveillance and vehicle data would soon become the most critical pieces of evidence in determining what happened that morning. At around 5:30 a.m., the car suddenly accelerated down Progress Drive toward the Plidco building, reaching 100 miles per hour. Investigators said the accelerator was fully pressed and no braking occurred before the impact. The vehicle smashed directly into the commercial building. The crash was catastrophic. Russo and Flanagan were killed almost instantly. Sherilla was the only one to survive. Why did prosecutors believe it was intentional? The biggest piece of evidence came from the vehicle's event data recorder. The data showed the car accelerated continuously and steering remained controlled, suggesting a deliberate path. The prosecution argued this showed a conscious decision to crash rather than an accidental loss of control. During the trial, prosecutors focused heavily on Sherilla's unstable and conflict-ridden relationship with Dominic Russo. They argued Sherilla feared abandonment and wanted to end the relationship permanently through this act. The prosecution described the crash as a calculated act of rage and control, not a reckless mistake. The defense strongly denied this, arguing the crash was a reckless accident possibly influenced by drug impairment. They claimed teenagers often drive recklessly and noted there was no suicide note or direct statement of intent. The defense questioned whether the black box evidence alone could prove intent beyond a reasonable doubt. The trial took place in 2023 in Ohio, presided over by Judge Margaret Russo. During sentencing, the judge delivered a widely quoted line, calling Sherilla a literal hell on wheels. The judge concluded the crash was intentional, convicting her of murder, felonious assault, and other serious charges. Sharilla received 2 life sentences and will first become eligible for parole in 2038. The case exploded online, dividing the internet into 2 camps, those who saw murder and those who saw a tragedy. Creators heavily debated toxic relationships, murder-suicide psychology, and whether teenagers should be tried as adults. In 2026, the case surged again after the release of the documentary The Crash, which re-examined the evidence. The film reignited debate over whether the conviction was fully justified or if it was reckless driving interpreted as murder. One chilling detail was that the crash angle may have protected the driver's side, leading to Sharilla's survival. As of 2026, Sharilla remains incarcerated in Ohio. Her story remains one of the most debated modern murder cases. The Sarah Grace Patrick case, a story that shocked a community and captured the internet's attention. Who is Sarah Grace Patrick? She's a Georgia teenager accused of a crime that seems impossible to comprehend. Patrick is accused of murdering her mother and stepfather in a case that rocked Carrollton, Georgia. The victims were Kristen Brock and James Brock, members of her own family. The case sent shockwaves through local residents and ignited the true crime community online. Massive attention centered on the fact that Patrick was only 17 years old at the time. Investigators allege the horrific killings took place right inside the family's own home. Prosecutors further claim that the crime scene may have been manipulated after the fact. Social media platforms exploded with theories about the motive and the family's hidden dynamics. The events occurred in Carrollton, a suburban community located just west of Atlanta. Authorities reported that Kristen and James Brock were found dead inside their residence. Both victims had suffered violent injuries, according to emergency responders called to the scene. Investigators immediately began a deep dive into digital evidence and phone records. They carefully reconstructed timelines of the events unfolding inside the house. Suspicion grew as inconsistencies allegedly surfaced during initial questioning. Detectives quickly shifted their primary focus onto Sarah Grace Patrick. Prosecutors later claimed that physical evidence directly contradicted her initial statements. Public details were limited initially because Patrick was still a minor at the time. I work at a hospital, and this experience has had me absolutely dumbfounded. I've been a nurse for a few years now. We regularly coordinate care with the radiology departments to get patients scans, x-rays, and so on. I had worked around this older coworker from radiology for a few years. We weren't close, but he was always really kind. Around December, I had a few exciting things happening in my personal life and was just mentally all over the place at work. It's not uncommon to go long periods without seeing coworkers because of crazy hospital schedules. So on this day in particular, I was very busy and rushing to the medication room next to where the x-ray machine is stored. That's when I see my coworker fidgeting with the x-ray machine, trying to unlock it. I wasn't planning on making small talk. I was going to just enter the med room, but then something told me, "Say hi to him." So I said, "Hi, coworker, how are you? Haven't seen you in a while." Welcome to the Chronicles of the Haunted Pub. We live above and manage a historic building in England built way back in the 1700s. Before it was a pub, this place served as old stables. With centuries of history, you can imagine the stories trapped within these walls. Sightings have been common for years. Customers often reported an older couple sitting quietly at the bar, only to vanish when approached. The sounds of hooves and stools being dragged across the floor are part of the daily routine here. It's a busy place, even when it's empty. 10 years ago, a medium visited us because the activity was getting too weird to ignore. What she found was truly overwhelming. In our upstairs function room, she recalled hundreds of spirits passing through. The room is 15 feet tall with these ancient stable beams. Stories have circulated for years about people being hung in those very beams back when the building was still a stable. One spirit we've heard about constantly is a young girl, around 10 to 12 years old. Eventually, her activity followed us into our flat. But the cellar is where things get truly dark. The medium said there's an extremely bad entity down there, causing her immediate discomfort. She refused to stay in the cellar for more than a minute. She wanted us all to leave immediately because of the spirit's malevolence. One day, while I was in the beer garden, I looked up and saw a man's face staring down from the function room window. I wasn't the only one. My partner and a colleague ran up as fast as they could, thinking a customer was where they shouldn't be. But when they got there, no one. The only sign that anyone had been there was the curtain by the window, which was still moving. No breeze, no windows open, just movement. We checked the cameras immediately. There was no sign of a physical person, just that curtain moving all on its own. Staff members have often felt hair or clothes being pulled while changing barrels in the cellar. That bad entity seems to want attention. The worst part is the sabotage. Beer lines are physically disconnected, causing us to lose gallons of stock. Those lines aren't easy to remove. For 3 years straight, the fire and burglar alarms would trigger at exactly 3 a.m., almost every single night. The sensors always pointed to the same spots, the function room or 9 times out of 10, the cellar. Technicians found no faults. Back in our flat, we'd hear little feet running up and down the hallway at 3 a.m., sometimes laughter, sometimes a soft whisper. Our 2 dogs and 2 cats sensed it too. The cats would stare down the hallway with fur standing up. The dogs would growl deep and low. Things finally slowed down this past year. The alarm stopped going off, and we thought we finally had some peace, until recently. Yesterday, my partner heard 2 loud female coughs while cashing up. Then came the constant thumping in our flat once again. Even my mother refuses to stay here long. She gets severe headaches and says she feels like someone is always watching her. A colleague who stayed in our spare room woke up with huge scratch marks on her back. There were no animals in the room. The door was shut. I started getting random bruises all over my body. I went to the hospital constantly, but doctors couldn't explain it. They called it a mystery. After hundreds of tests and scans, they found nothing. It only seemed to happen when the spiritual activity was at its peak. I'm pregnant now, and I'm scared. I don't want these spirits anywhere near my unborn child. I need to know how to protect my home. How do I cleanse this place of bad spirits? Do I need a professional medium to step in and clear the energy once and for all? I want our sleepless nights to be over. I want to feel safe in our own home again. If you have any advice, please, I'm listening. This has been the Haunted Pub Chronicles. Stay safe out there and keep the spirits at bay. Good night. The case of Aaron Patterson became one of the biggest true crime stories in the world. It combined a seemingly ordinary family lunch with one of the most disturbing poisoning cases in modern Australian history. The lunch guests were all relatives of Patterson's estranged husband, Don and Gail Patterson. Also attending were Heather and Ian Wilkinson. It seemed like a simple family gathering. Tragically, 3 died after the meal: Don, Gail, and Heather. Only Ian survived. Ian survived after weeks in intensive care, becoming the sole witness to the event. It all began on July 29, 2023, in the small town of Leongatha, Victoria. Patterson invited the family to lunch, claiming she needed advice about a serious medical issue. She told them she wanted to discuss how to tell her children about her diagnosis. The meal served was beef Wellington with mashed potatoes and green beans. But the Wellington contained death cap mushrooms, one of the deadliest fungi on Earth. These mushrooms, known as Amanita phalloides, are notorious for their extreme toxicity. They destroy the liver and can cause total organ failure within days. They often look harmless and may not show symptoms for many hours after ingestion. Victims often initially think they have simple food poisoning before their organs begin shutting down. The poison is extremely difficult to survive without rapid medical treatment or a liver transplant. Within hours of the lunch, all 4 guests became violently ill with severe symptoms. They were rushed to the hospital as doctors quickly began to suspect mushroom poisoning. Investigators soon uncovered strange details. First, Erin Patterson did not become seriously ill. Although she claimed to have eaten the meal, prosecutors argued she served herself differently. A food dehydrator was later found dumped at a rubbish facility with traces of death caps. Patterson's fingerprints were on the appliance, providing a strong piece of physical evidence. Investigators also found phone data, allegedly showing searches about toxic mushrooms months before. Most shockingly, prosecutors claimed Patterson fabricated a cancer diagnosis to lure the family. The 2025 trial at the Supreme Court of Victoria became a massive online phenomenon. Live streams and TikTok breakdowns followed every update as the world watched in shock. The defense argued it was an accident, but the prosecution insisted it was a careful plan. In July 2025, the jury found Patterson guilty of murder and attempted murder. She received life imprisonment, one of the harshest sentences in Australian history. The judge called it a profound betrayal of trust, ending a case that will never be forgotten. In the shadow of the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, a legend persists that defies medical logic. Opened in the mid-1800s, this Gothic institution was a place of isolation and experimental treatments. Behind these stone walls, grim histories of overcrowding and violent wards were tragically common. The facility often held far more patients than it was ever designed to safely accommodate. At its peak, the asylum's atmosphere was ripe for the birth of dark, paranormal folklore. The story begins in the 1930s, with a patient transferred following a series of violent episodes. Staff noted he was unusually calm during outbursts, but deeply obsessed with the concept of death. He was convinced the asylum wasn't real, often telling nurses he had died there once before. "I died in this building already," he reportedly said. "They brought me back wrong." Disturbingly, he knew secrets of the building's hidden corridors and deceased staff he couldn't have known. He described sealed-off rooms and forgotten treatment areas long before maintenance ever mentioned them. Some workers believed he read files in secret. Others were convinced something far more sinister was occurring. His knowledge of the institution's floor plan seemed to transcend any physical access he possessed. One night, guards found him standing perfectly still, facing a wall in a dark, empty hallway. He remained there for hours. When staff finally moved him, he whispered, "They're buried behind it." Later, workers opening the wall for repairs reportedly found rusted restraints and human remains. Whether the bones were real or a product of folklore, the legend quickly spread among employees. The patient's eerie accuracy cemented his status as a figure of genuine dread within the institution. The story's title comes from claims that the patient survived events that should have been fatal. He reportedly survived violent seizures, severe injuries, and attacks from other patients without explanation. Each time staff believed him dead, he would unexpectedly regain consciousness and open his eyes. One nurse allegedly said, every time they covered him, he opened his eyes again. Eventually, he reportedly succumbed to a final, violent seizure in the middle of a cold night. But the legend didn't end with his burial. Sightings of a tall figure began almost immediately. Security guards described a shadowy shape in the corridors that vanished the moment they approached. Locked doors opened on their own, accompanied by soft, coughing sounds and whispers saying, "I'm still here." While there is no verified record of this specific patient, the legend grew from real tragedies. Overcrowded conditions and genuine fear of psychiatric care in that era fueled these persistent ghost stories. Trans-Allegheny remains a testament to the thin line between historical reality and the paranormal. The legend of the patient who wouldn't die lives on in the silence of these abandoned halls. James Charles was once the undisputed king of beauty YouTube. He turned makeup tutorials into a global empire. Starting in 2015, his charisma and talent quickly landed him celebrity collaborations and a historic deal with CoverGirl. As the first male ambassador for the brand, he wasn't just an influencer. He was a mainstream trailblazer. At his peak, he was attending the Met Gala and launching makeup palettes that sold out in minutes. But the fall was coming. It all began to unravel in 2019 with a video that stopped the internet. By Sister. Toddy Westbrook, his former mentor, uploaded a viral expose accusing James of manipulative behavior and betrayal. The backlash was immediate. James lost millions of subscribers in mere days, one of the fastest drops in history. James eventually fired back with his own video, presenting evidence that shifted public opinion back in his favor, at least for a while. He returned to creating content, but the Sister Squad era was over, and a darker chapter was about to begin. In 2021, the most damaging controversy hit. Serious allegations surfaced regarding his interactions with underage fans. Multiple accusations emerged involving inappropriate online conversations with minors, leading to a massive outcry across social media. James admitted in a video that he had been desperate and careless in verifying ages, confessing to flirtatious chats with people who were underage. The consequences were swift and severe. YouTube temporarily demonetized his channel and major sponsorships were pulled. Collaborations dried up as the beauty community and fellow creators distanced themselves from his brand. Before the scandals, he was a mainstream icon. Afterward, his public image was heavily controversial and polarized. The influence he once held in the beauty community declined significantly. The glow-up had been replaced by a long shadow. Unlike many who vanish entirely, James still maintains an audience. He continues to upload, but things are different. His reputation has never fully recovered to its peak era. His story remains a cautionary tale about fame and responsibility in the digital age. The rise and fall of James Charles shows how quickly a digital empire can crumble when trust is lost. From the heights of CoverGirl to the depths of controversy, his journey has been one of extreme highs and devastating lows. In the end, James Charles remains a central figure in YouTube history for both his artistry and his scandals. Thanks for watching this deep dive into the rise and fall of a beauty icon. We'll see where his career goes next, but one thing is certain, the beauty world will never be the same. Whether you're a supporter or a critic, his impact on the industry is undeniable. Make sure to like and subscribe for more deep dives into your favorite creators. The world of influencers is constantly changing, and we'll be here to cover it all. See you in the next one. Bye, sisters. This happened around 3 years ago. Back then, I used to go to my physics tuition alone. The tuition was pretty far from my house, so it took me around 30 minutes to go and come back. That day, it had been drizzling since morning. I don't know why, but the whole atmosphere felt strangely creepy from the beginning. Anyway, I left home around 6:30 a.m. for tuition. The class ended around 9 a.m., and when I came outside, it was still raining lightly. So I started walking back home. To be honest, my mood already felt weird that day for no reason. While walking, I kept looking around, but I barely saw any familiar faces. Everything felt oddly unfamiliar, even though it was my usual route. Eventually, I entered my locality. It was still raining. Then suddenly, when I looked to my right, I saw a man standing in front of a fish stall with his back turned toward me. He looked exactly like an uncle who lived a few houses away from ours. I thought maybe he was buying fish. And honestly, I remember thinking to myself, finally, I saw someone familiar. Then I just continued walking and went home. While entering the house, I noticed a small crowd gathered across the road talking about something. I didn't think much of it. I kept my bag down, washed up, and sat down to relax. A few minutes later, my mother came into the room. She said, "Did you know? That uncle died last night." The moment she said that, I literally froze, because barely 5 minutes earlier, I had seen him standing at that fish stall. So if he died the previous night, then who did I see? Even today, I don't have an explanation. Maybe the person standing there only looked similar to him from behind. But still, it never felt like a random mistake to me. The weirdest part is that the moment I saw that person, that uncle instantly came to my mind. And then just minutes later, I heard he had died the night before. Feels like a little too much coincidence, doesn't it? I wasn't extremely close to him or anything. We just had normal neighborhood conversations sometimes, but I knew his wife pretty well. Whenever we met on the road, she would always stop and talk to me. To this day, I still can't explain what happened that morning. Maybe it was just my eyes playing tricks on me, or maybe it was something else. Whittingham Hospital was one of the largest psychiatric hospitals in Britain. Opened in 1873 near Preston, it eventually housed thousands of patients. It became almost like a self-contained town, with its own kitchens, farms, workshops, and even its own railway. But behind that massive institution, decades of disturbing allegations began to grow. In the 1960s, formal investigations uncovered serious abuse and mistreatment inside the hospital. Reports included claims of violent handling of patients, overmedication, and cruel punishments by staff members. The scandal became nationally known after whistleblowers exposed what was happening inside certain wards. Former employees later described parts of the hospital as deeply unsettling, even during their normal shifts. This led to the legend of the locked ward, a place that even the staff supposedly avoided after dark. According to local legends, the ward was suddenly closed after a patient death, with furniture and equipment left inside untouched. Lights reportedly flickered despite disconnected electricity, and nurse call bells rang with nobody present. One former cleaner claimed she entered the ward in the 1980s and saw a patient sitting motionless on a bed. She reportedly looked away for a moment, and the figure vanished. Security staff who checked afterward found the ward empty. The most repeated stories involve sounds heard echoing through the old corridors: metal bed frames, scraping floors, distant screaming, and whispers behind locked doors. Former workers described hearing patients calling nurses by name, and even the hum of electrotherapy machines long after they were retired. Some workers described hearing a voice whisper, "Don't let them treat me." Paranormal investigators who later explored the buildings claimed they experienced sudden temperature drops and shadow figures. They reported footsteps in sealed corridors and doors slamming without any wind to move them. Like many Victorian hospitals, Whittingham had service tunnels beneath its grounds. Urban explorers found abandoned wheelchairs, rusted restraints, and forgotten patient files in these flooded passageways. While many stories were exaggerated, the hospital's real atmosphere of suffering and isolation fueled these terrifying legends. What makes Whittingham unsettling is that it wasn't just a story. It was a real institution where thousands spent years isolated from society. By the late 20th century, changing attitudes led to its closure in 1995. Today, much of the site has been redeveloped, but stories about the locked ward still circulate among those who visit the grounds, a chilling reminder of the hospital's dark past. The legend of the Screaming Woman is one of the most repeated stories connected to Danvers State Hospital, a massive psychiatric institution opened in 1878. Danvers was built using the frightening Kirkbride Plan, a design meant to isolate mentally ill patients from society. Over time, the hospital became severely overcrowded. Reports from former employees described horrific conditions. Former employees described straitjackets, solitary confinement, ice baths, and electroshock treatments. And patients locked in basement wards for days at a time. The darkness was absolute. The Screaming Woman story supposedly began in the women's violent ward sometime during the 1930s or 1940s. According to local accounts, a female patient was kept isolated after becoming increasingly paranoid and aggressive. Nurses claimed she constantly screamed that something lives in the walls. Staff believed she suffered from hallucinations. One night, the screaming suddenly stopped. The silence was more terrifying than the noise. When attendants finally checked her room, they allegedly found her dead on the floor under strange circumstances. Some versions say her face showed extreme terror. Her fingernails were torn and bloodied, and deep scratches covered the inside of the door as if she were trying to claw her way out. After her death, staff began hearing screaming from the now empty room. But it wasn't just her. Multiple employees described hearing different kinds of screams, crying, rage, and whispering. They heard laughter and desperate pleading for help echoing through the ventilation shafts. Night workers claimed the sounds moved through the hallways as if someone were running unseen between the wards. By the 1960s, part of the women's wing was allegedly shut down due to structural decay and repeated complaints. Workers began refusing to enter that section alone, claiming the atmosphere had become heavy and hostile. Maintenance workers later claimed they found old restraints, hidden patient notes, and scratched messages in the walls. One story says a worker entered an abandoned hydrotherapy room and heard breathing behind him despite being alone. When he turned around, the wet floor supposedly contained barefoot footprints leading toward a drain. He quit the next day. While the ghost story itself is folklore, the real history of Danvers is genuinely disturbing. At its peak, the hospital held over 2,000 patients despite being designed for far fewer. The overcrowding was horrific. The hospital also became associated with controversial psychiatric treatments, including lobotomies. It was a place of suffering. The building's Gothic architecture, endless corridors, and documented suffering fueled the terrifying legends that remain. Danvers later became one of America's most infamous abandoned asylums, inspiring horror media like Session 9. Its echoes are still heard today. The basement tape story is one of the darker legends connected to Pennhurst, a real institution that operated from 1908 until 1987. Pennhurst was originally presented as a care facility for people with intellectual disabilities, but over decades, reports exposed horrifying conditions. In the 1960s and 70s, investigators and journalists documented patients left naked, injured, or heavily sedated for long periods of time. It was after the hospital finally closed its doors that the legend of the basement tapes began to grow in the shadows of its history. According to former workers, renovation crews exploring lower maintenance tunnels and sealed basement rooms reportedly made a discovery. They found dusty, reel-to-reel audio tapes, old patient records, and rusted medical equipment locked away for decades. The tapes supposedly contained disturbing recordings from decades earlier, capturing the raw sounds of life inside Pennhurst. Stories claim the recordings captured patients crying uncontrollably, screaming during treatments, and doctors discussing restraint procedures. The most chilling part is the voice of a woman repeatedly whispering, "Please don't take me downstairs." One alleged tape supposedly ends with violent crashing noises, followed by a sudden heavy silence. The creepiest part of the legend involves claims of an unofficial underground ward, a secret level hidden from the world. Former employees allegedly described isolation rooms hidden below the main hospital and punishment areas for violent patients. These were punishment areas and hydrotherapy rooms where heavily restrained patients were kept far away from any visitors. Some stories even claimed experimental treatments occurred there, though many details became exaggerated through folklore. While no verified evidence proves secret experiments happened underground, the real abuse scandals were horrifying enough. After Pennhurst closed, it became a magnet for paranormal investigators and trespassers reporting strange experiences. They reported hearing voices through dead intercom systems and echoing screams in empty corridors. Shadow figures have been seen in the tunnels, and doors have been heard slamming deep underground. Others reported sudden cold spots in sealed wards where no air could move, and the sound of heavy doors slamming shut. One recurring story describes investigators hearing children laughing in basement hallways where no children were present. Audio equipment supposedly picked up whispers saying, "Help me," turning Pennhurst into one of America's most infamous haunted locations. The truly disturbing part is that Pennhurst's real history was already horrifying without the ghost stories. A famous 1968 television investigation exposed brutal conditions inside the institution and shocked the public. Reports described residents being neglected, restrained, and living in terrible conditions for years on end. The scandal eventually contributed to major reforms in institutional care across the United States. While the basement tapes remain mostly legend, they are rooted in a place where genuine suffering undeniably occurred. The Hellfire Club is one of the most infamous secret societies in British history, a mixture of real aristocratic debauchery, political scandal, and Gothic legend. Although later myths exaggerated parts of the story, the real club was disturbing enough on its own. It was a world of hidden power and elite satire. The most famous version of the club was founded in the 1750s by Sir Francis Dashwood, a wealthy and politically connected figure. Dashwood was a powerful man, eventually appointed Chancellor of the Exchequer. He wasn't just a rebel, he was part of the establishment. He created a society officially known as the Monks of Medmenham. Its headquarters became Medmenham Abbey, an old ruined abbey near the Thames. The group adopted the famous motto, Fais ce que tu voudras, do what thou wilt. It was a call to total freedom. That phrase later inspired the infamous occultist Aleister Crowley over a century later. The club's shadow reached far into the future. No complete records of their meetings survive, which helped fuel endless rumors of what really happened behind closed doors. Accounts suggest members engaged in heavy drinking, mock religious ceremonies, sexual gatherings, and intense political plotting. They were known for anti-church satire and gambling, essentially thumbing their noses at the social order of the time. Women invited to these gatherings were sometimes called nuns, continuing the club's mockery of monastic traditions. Meetings reportedly involved robes, candles, fake rituals, and occult symbolism hidden deep in underground chambers. Many stories came from gossip and enemies. Historians still debate how much was theatrical performance versus genuinely sinister intent. The club became deeply associated with the West Wycombe Caves, a network of man-made tunnels that served as their playground. These caves provided the perfect sanctuary where secret ceremonies allegedly occurred by flickering torchlight. The guest list was a who's who of the 18th century. It included politicians, nobles, and influential writers. Famous figures like John Wilkes and even Benjamin Franklin were allegedly linked to these clandestine gatherings. Over time, darker stories emerged, claiming the club was linked to disappearances and actual satanic rituals. One famous legend tells of a baboon brought into the caves that members mistook for a demon in the candlelight. Whether it was a prank or a genuine scare, the story only added to the club's terrifying and eccentric reputation. The club shocked 18th century Britain by mocking Christianity and the very social order they were meant to uphold. To many, they represented the debauchery and corruption of the ruling classes, hiding their sins deep underground. The most unsettling aspect is that beneath all the myths, there really was a network of wealthy men gathering in secret. They conducted activities hidden from the public eye, leveraging their power to escape scrutiny. Even today, the Hellfire Club remains a symbol of the dark side of the Enlightenment and the power of secrecy. Their story lives on in literature and pop culture, a cautionary tale of what happens when the elite play God. The caves still stand today, silent witnesses to the laughter and rituals of the men who once called themselves monks. Whether they were true occultists or just bored aristocrats, the Hellfire Club will always haunt the history of Britain. Thanks for exploring the depths of history with us. The secrets of the caves remain buried for now. Stay curious and keep digging into the past. See you in the next deep dive. The Borley Rectory haunting is one of the most infamous paranormal legends in British history, a large Victorian house that became synonymous with the unexplained. The legend begins with a forbidden love between a local monk and a nun whose tragic attempt to escape ended in execution and burial within convent walls. They were caught, the monk was executed, and the nun was allegedly buried alive, a story that would seed a century of sightings. Villagers reported a shadowy nun walking near the rectory at dusk. This figure became known as the Nun of Borley, vanishing whenever approached. The rectory was built in 1862 by Reverend Henry Bull. Almost immediately, the walls began to talk, and the bells began to ring on their own. Residents reported whispering voices and windows shaking violently. The Bull family grew so accustomed to the hauntings, they simply stopped reacting. One of the daughters claimed she regularly saw the ghostly nun outside the house, a persistent reminder of the land's dark history. In 1928, the Smith family moved in and discovered a human skull hidden in a cupboard. After this, the activity intensified. Phantom footsteps, lights in empty windows, and furniture moving on its own. Terrified, the Smiths contacted a famous investigator. Harry Price, the most famous ghost hunter of his era, arrived to document what he would call the most haunted house in England. Price used scientific methods to observe objects thrown across rooms, stones appearing from nowhere, and glass shattering without cause. He witnessed stone throwing and mysterious odors. The house seemed to be lashing out at its investigators in a flurry of activity. Most chilling were the messages that appeared on the walls. One plea, allegedly from the spirit of a nun, read, "Marianne, please help me." Price's books and reports turned Borley into a national sensation, cementing its place in the public imagination. In 1939, the rectory caught fire under mysterious circumstances. Some blamed a knocked-over lamp, others blamed the spirits. Even as a shell of ruins, visitors claimed to feel cold spots and see the figure of the nun wandering through the charred remains. The ruins were eventually demolished in 1944, but the site remains a magnet for researchers and believers alike. The physical structure is gone, but the controversy persists. Was it a genuine haunting or a masterfully staged hoax? Skeptics argue that Harry Price exaggerated his findings for fame, and that many events were psychologically influenced or staged. A critical report from the Society for Psychical Research later questioned Price's methods, casting doubt on the science of Borley. Yet, believers point to the hundreds of witnesses who reported similar events decades before the house became famous. Borley Rectory influenced a century of haunted house stories, blending Victorian Gothic atmosphere with modern paranormal study. It remains the perfect mix of religious mystery, psychological fear, and media sensation, a cornerstone of British folklore. Genuine haunting or grand fabrication, the mystery of Borley Rectory continues to haunt the edges of English history. The Enfield poltergeist remains one of the most famous and debated paranormal investigations ever recorded in the UK. It all began in August 1977 inside a modest council house on Green Street in North London. Living there was Peggy Hodgson, a single mother raising 4 children, most notably 11-year-old Janet and 13-year-old Margaret. This unassuming house at 284 Green Street would soon become the center of a terrifying 18-month ordeal. The family first reported loud, unexplained knocking sounds vibrating through the walls and furniture moving by itself. The activity peaked when a heavy chest of drawers allegedly slid across a bedroom floor, prompting Peggy to call for help. A neighbor who came to assist later claimed to have seen a chair wobble and slide on its own without any human touch. Even the police were witnesses. A female constable signed an official statement after seeing a chair move across the floor. Over the next 18 months, the haunting escalated. Witnesses described toys flying across rooms and objects seemingly levitating. Knocking patterns began answering questions, water appeared mysteriously, and fires started unexpectedly in various parts of the house. In some of the most bizarre reports, furniture was found completely flipped upside down, often in rooms that were locked from the outside. As the activity intensified, it became clear that the most terrifying and violent incidents centered directly around young Janet Hodgson. Then came the voice. Janet began speaking in a deep, growling male tone that investigators claimed was physiologically impossible for a child. The voice identified itself as Bill Wilkins, a man who had died in the living room years before the Hodgsons moved in. Baffled doctors examined Janet, finding no damage to her vocal cords despite her speaking in the guttural voice for hours at a time. Prominent paranormal researchers Maurice Grosse and Guy Lyon Playfair spent months in the house, documenting every occurrence. Their investigation attracted international media attention, leading Playfair to publish his famous account, "This House is Haunted." Journalists from the Daily Mirror were also present, capturing photographs and recording interviews that fueled the public's fascination. These iconic images of Janet apparently floating above her bed became the defining symbols of the Enfield case. While supporters saw proof of levitation, skeptics argued that the photos simply captured a child jumping with great force. The case became even more controversial when the investigators caught the children faking certain events like bending spoons. Janet later admitted to faking a small percentage of the activity, claiming it was done to see if the researchers were truly paying attention. Despite the faking, Guy Lyon Playfair insisted that 98% of the phenomena remained entirely unexplained by science. Critics, however, pointed to household stress and the power of suggestion as the most likely explanations for the haunting. What makes Enfield unique is the sheer volume of evidence, from police reports to hours of audio recordings and over 30 witnesses. The case has left an indelible mark on popular culture, inspiring hit films like The Conjuring 2 and countless paranormal documentaries. Perhaps the creepiest detail was the knocking that allegedly answered questions intelligently, accurately counting the people in the room. Whether it was a genuine haunting or a massive psychological hoax, the Enfield poltergeist remains Britain's most disturbing case. Thank you for exploring this chilling history with us. The truth of what happened on Green Street may never fully be known. If you enjoyed this investigative dive, please like and subscribe for more deep explorations into the unexplained.
The Jameson family disappearance. One of the most disturbing family mysteries ever recorded in America. In October 2009, an entire family vanished into the wilderness of Oklahoma. Not just one person, not just a child, an entire family. Gone. Bobby Dale, Sherilyn, and 6-year-old Madison Jameson. What investigators found afterward only made the mystery darker. On October 8th, the family drove into the remote Sambois Mountains. They were reportedly searching for land to buy for a new, isolated life. But behind the scenes, things were unraveling. Family members said Bobby and Sherilyn had become increasingly paranoid, fearing they were being watched. They believed their house was haunted. They had become deeply withdrawn, pulled into a world of fear and isolation. Then, investigators found the security footage, chilling images of the family loading their truck before leaving. For nearly an hour, no one spoke. No one smiled. Detectives said they moved like they were exhausted or terrified. It was a silent, mechanical departure into the unknown. 8 days later, hunters found that truck deep in the mountains. It was abandoned, but what was left inside was even more haunting. Inside were their wallets, IDs, phones, and $32,000 in cash. Everything they would need to survive or start over was simply left behind. And their dog, Maisie, was still there. Malnourished and near death, she had been waiting in the truck for 8 days. Why would they leave her? The mystery deepened when police found a letter written by Sherilyn. It wasn't a suicide note. It was a message of anger and pain. The letter described deep marital tension and resentment toward Bobby. Was their home life collapsing before they ever reached the mountains? Rumors began to swirl. Some claimed the family practiced spiritual rituals or feared demons. A pastor even told police the family believed spirits haunted them. There were stories of drugs, cults, and criminal disputes. But in the wilderness of Oklahoma, theories were all anyone had for 4 long years. In 2013, the silence was finally broken. Hunters discovered skeletal remains in a wooded area just 4 miles from the truck. The family was found together, but the elements had taken their toll. Medical examiners couldn't determine how they died. No trauma, no gunshots, no answers. Was it a murder-suicide triggered by a mental health crisis? Or did they simply get lost and succumb to the elements? Both theories leave major questions. Some suspect drug-related violence or an encounter with the wrong people. Others can't shake the family's obsession with spirits and demons. Most cases leave a trail. This one only leaves confusion. A silent family, abandoned money, and a mystery that even today, no one can explain. That footage of the family loading their truck in total silence remains one of the most haunting images in modern true crime. What happened in those mountains? The Jameson family. A mystery that remains unsolved. Stay tuned for more deep dives into the unknown.
The Lindbergh kidnapping, the crime of the century. On the night of March 1st, 1932, the 20-month-old son of famous aviator Charles Lindbergh vanished from his second-floor nursery in rural New Jersey. America became obsessed instantly. Lindbergh wasn't just famous, he was one of the most celebrated people on Earth. After completing the first solo nonstop flight across the Atlantic in 1927, the entire country followed every detail of his life. At around 10 p.m., the child's nurse discovered the nursery empty. A handwritten ransom note was found on the windowsill. Outside the house, a homemade wooden ladder lay broken. Investigators believed the kidnapper climbed directly to the second floor. The ransom note demanded $50,000, later increased to $70,000. It contained strange spelling and odd grammar. The wording became one of the most analyzed ransom messages in history. But the strangest part of the case was the ladder itself. Experts discovered it was homemade, built in multiple sections with unusual woodworking techniques. Could it realistically support an adult carrying a child? Some argued the structure seemed dangerously unstable for the crime. A mysterious intermediary named John F. Condon became involved, calling himself Jeffsy. In a Bronx cemetery, Condon met a man known only as John Money was exchanged, but the child was never returned alive. On May 12, 1932, the child's body was discovered in woods only a few miles from the Lindbergh home. Because decomposition was severe, exact injuries and timing became difficult to determine. That uncertainty would haunt the case forever. 2 years later, police traced ransom bills to Bruno Hauptmann, a German immigrant carpenter living in New York. They found ransom money in his garage and wood in his attic, allegedly matching the latter. The case appeared overwhelming, but controversy exploded. Critics argued the latter was too unstable, and its break pattern didn't match the official reconstruction. Why would a kidnapper leave the body so close? Critics questioned why it wasn't discovered earlier. The 1935 trial became a media circus. Newspapers printed daily updates as crowds gathered outside courtrooms. Despite arguments of police mishandling, Hauptmann was convicted and sentenced to death. He was executed in 1936. Was Hauptmann really alone? No convincing evidence ever identified accomplices. Was the child killed accidentally? The case led to the Lindbergh Law, making kidnapping a federal crime and transformed celebrity culture forever. The family eventually left the U.S. for Europe to escape public obsession. But one central mystery remains. Did police catch the real mastermind? Or just the man easiest to convict in the most famous crime in America?
The silent train car murder. On May 27, 1912, an overnight sleeper train rolled north from Memphis toward Chicago through the darkness of rural Illinois. Most passengers slept peacefully, but when the train stopped near Centralia at dawn, attendants noticed something strange about one compartment. No movement, no response. The door was locked from the inside. Inside the berth sat traveling salesman William Desmond, dead in his seat from a single stab wound to the chest. What made the case terrifying was how impossible it seemed. No one heard a scream, no murder weapon was found. Nothing appeared stolen, windows were secured. The compartment had been locked from the inside. Investigators believed the killer somehow entered and exited the tiny sleeper compartment without being seen during the noisy overnight journey. At the time, rail travel was considered modern and glamorous, but the murder shattered that illusion. Newspapers across America described it as the perfect railway murder. Police were desperate for answers. Police questioned porters, conductors, and fellow salesmen who were on the train that night. They searched for a mysterious passenger reportedly seen wandering the corridor after midnight. One theory suggested a robbery interrupted by resistance, but the victim's valuables remained untouched. Another claimed Desmond had enemies tied to gambling debts or affairs in southern cities. But forensic science in 1912 was primitive. Fingerprints were smudged by the sheer chaos of the investigation. Passengers walked through the scene, and evidence was contaminated before detectives ever arrived. Several suspects were arrested over the years, including a porter and another businessman, but none could be tied conclusively to the crime. The leads eventually dried up. The case faded into legend, becoming one of the most enduring mysteries of the early 20th century. Some later writers even suggested the locked room setup inspired fictional railway mysteries in the decades that followed. What still unsettles historians today is the silence. A crowded sleeper train. Thin walls, narrow corridors where every footstep could be heard, yet nobody clearly heard the moment William Desmond died, and whoever killed him vanished before sunrise, leaving only a ghost story in their wake. The silent train car murder remains unsolved, a perfect crime from a bygone era. It serves as a reminder that even in a crowded room, some secrets can be carried into the night forever.
The Springfield Three, one of the strangest disappearances in American history. 3 women vanished from a quiet suburban home during the night, and it looked as if they had simply stepped out for a moment. No bodies, no confirmed suspect, no explanation. Even more disturbing, there were signs someone had carefully cleaned the scene before police arrived. The victims: Cheryl Levitt, Suzanne Streeter, and Stacy McCall. Cheryl Levitt was a 47-year-old single mother and hairdresser, known for being cautious and protective. Suzanne Streeter and Stacy McCall were just 19 and 18, both recent high school graduates. All 3 disappeared together from Cheryl's house in Springfield on June 7, 1992. Earlier that evening, Suzanne and Stacy attended graduation parties with friends. They were meant to stay elsewhere, but the house was crowded. At 2 a.m., they drove to Cheryl's home instead. This is the last confirmed sighting of them alive. The next day, friends arrived expecting to see them sleeping. Instead, they found a house of shadows. Inside, all 3 women's purses were lined up neatly. Their makeup and cigarettes were untouched. The cars were outside. The family dog was alone. The beds appeared slept in, but the women were gone. Not one of them took keys, money, or clothes. It was as if they vanished in seconds. Then there was the front porch light. It had been shattered. Before police arrived, friends unknowingly cleaned up the glass, likely destroying the kidnappers' fingerprints. After the disappearance, the house received disturbing phone calls with heavy breathing and threats. There was no blood, no forced entry, and no screams. Investigators believe they were forced out at gunpoint. A witness reported a strange green van near the house that night, but it was never identified. Years later, a theory emerged that they were buried under a local hospital parking garage. It remains a mystery. A main suspect was Robert Craig Cox, a convicted kidnapper who lived nearby and claimed the bodies would never be found. Theories range from a planned abduction by multiple people to a local serial predator. Most missing person cases leave a trace. This one left almost nothing. 3 women simply vanished from existence. The house at 1717 East Del Mar remains one of the most infamous addresses in true crime history. More than 30 years later, we still wait for answers. This is the mystery of the Springfield 3.
In the late 19th century, a shadow fell over the growing frontier city of Austin, Texas. A series of brutal, unsolved crimes would soon become known as the Servant Girl Annihilator murders. Between December 1884 and December 1885, Austin was gripped by terror as a serial killer targeted the community. At the time, Austin was a rapidly expanding city, undergoing a period of intense urban and social transformation. The spree began on the night of December 30th, 1884, with the attack on Molly Smith. Over the course of 1 year, 8 people were confirmed killed, primarily Black women working as domestic servants. Most victims were attacked at night within the safety of their homes or the servant quarters where they lived. The attacks were characterized by extreme brutality, involving mutilation and meticulous planning. The killer shared a disturbing pattern, dragging victims outdoors and using sharp weapons with increasing savagery. As the body count rose, a profound sense of panic and helplessness swept through the local community. The crimes exposed deep-seated racial and class tensions that defined the social landscape of the era. Austin's young police force struggled to cope with the unprecedented scale and violence of the spree. Hundreds of suspects were questioned and numerous arrests were made, but conclusive evidence remained elusive. Despite massive efforts and public pressure, not a single person was ever convicted for the murders. The name Servant Girl Annihilator was coined by the press, reportedly by the famous writer O. Henry. Porter was a resident of Austin at the time and observed the city's descent into fear firsthand. Toward the end of 1885, the killer's profile shifted, and 2 white women were also murdered. The death of Eula Phillips on Christmas Eve 1885 marked one of the final and most shocking attacks. That Christmas, instead of celebration, the city was filled with mourning and a desperate hunt for the killer. Then, just as abruptly as they had started, the murders ceased in late December 1885. Some have speculated about a link to Jack the Ripper, who would terrorize London just 3 years later. While theories of a shared identity persist, no definitive evidence has ever linked the 2 cases. The investigation was hampered by the limited forensic methods available to 19th century law enforcement. The case represents one of the earliest examples of mass media coverage surrounding a serial killer in America. Today, the Servant Girl Annihilator murders remain a significant part of Texas folklore and criminal history. They continue to be the subject of intense study by historians and criminologists alike. The mystery endures as one of the first recorded instances of a serial killer on American soil. The identity of the Annihilator remains unknown, leaving a chilling void in the history of the frontier. While the city moved on, the legacy of that terrifying year is never truly forgotten. Thank you for exploring this dark chapter of history with us. In the annals of American legal history, one case stands alone, a murder solved by a voice from beyond the grave. This is the story of the Greenbrier Ghost, a haunting tale of justice from the mountains of West Virginia in 1897. It began with a sudden death and a grieving mother who refused to believe her daughter died of natural causes. Elva Zona Heister, known simply as Zona, was a young woman whose life took a tragic turn shortly after her marriage. She had recently married Erasmus Edward Shue, a local blacksmith with a mysterious past. In January 1897, just months after their wedding, Zona was found dead in her home. While the town doctor initially attributed it to everlasting faint, Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heister, suspected foul play. Then the extraordinary happened. Mary Jane claimed that Zona's ghost appeared to her over 4 consecutive nights. The spirit told a chilling story. She hadn't died naturally. She had been strangled by her husband. The ghost revealed a specific detail. Her neck had been broken at the first vertebra. Mary Jane took her story to the local prosecutor, who was initially skeptical but eventually agreed to look closer. Driven by her persistence, authorities ordered Zona's body to be exhumed for a proper autopsy. The examination revealed exactly what the ghost had claimed. Zona's neck had indeed been broken. The windpipe was crushed and there were finger marks on her neck. It was clear. This was murder. Erasmus Shue was immediately arrested and charged with the murder of his wife. The trial took place in Lewisburg, West Virginia, drawing crowds from all over the county. The prosecution focused on the physical evidence found during the autopsy. The defense tried to discredit Mary Jane by highlighting her supernatural visions as the rambling of a grieving mother. But when she took the stand, her unwavering testimony about her daughter's ghost captivated the jury. It became the only case in U.S. history where testimony prompted by a ghost contributed to a murder conviction. After only an hour of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty. Shue was sentenced to life in prison, though he died just 3 years later from an epidemic. The Greenbrier ghost remains a unique landmark in legal lore, illustrating the intersection of science and belief. In Appalachia, the story has passed into folklore, a legend of a mother's love and a daughter's justice. It serves as a reminder that sometimes the truth cannot be buried, even in death. Today, a roadside marker near Sam Black Church commemorates the case for all who pass by. It stands as a testament to the time a ghost spoke in court and was finally heard. The case continues to inspire books, studies, and stories over a century later. A haunting mystery, a legal anomaly, and a legend that refuses to fade. The Greenbrier Ghost, where justice crossed the veil.
The 1860 Road Hill House murder was a crime that shocked Victorian Britain and changed the face of detective work forever. It began in the quiet village of Road, Wiltshire, at the home of the respectable Kent family. The Kents were a large family, living under the shadow of domestic tensions that were about to explode. On the morning of June 30th, 1860, the family woke to find 3-year-old Francis Saville Kent missing. His body was soon discovered, brutally murdered, and hidden in an outdoor privy on the grounds. The local police were overwhelmed, struggling to solve the crime amidst intense national press scrutiny. Scotland Yard dispatched Detective Inspector Jonathan Witcher, one of its first plainclothes investigators. Witcher's instincts quickly led him to 16-year-old Constance Kent, the victim's half-sister. He suspected she had disposed of a blood-stained nightdress to hide her involvement, but the public was outraged. To suspect a respectable young lady was seen as a violation of Victorian moral order. With insufficient evidence, the case against Constance collapsed, and Witcher's career was left in ruins. 5 years passed, and the mystery of Road Hill House seemed destined to remain unsolved. Then, in 1865, Constance Kent unexpectedly confessed to the murder while living in a religious home. She claimed her motive was jealousy and resentment towards her stepmother and half-brother. Constance was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment, finally closing the legal chapter of the case. While her confession was debated, it eventually vindicated Witcher's original investigative theory. The case inspired literary classics like Wilkie Collins's The Moonstone, often called the first modern detective novel. It spurred the professionalization of criminal investigation, highlighting the need for methodical detective work. The murder exposed deep-seated Victorian anxieties about domestic secrets and the fragility of middle-class morality. Today, the Road Hill House murder remains a landmark in British criminology and a subject of endless fascination. It challenged the way society viewed justice, class, and the hidden lives within the family home. The legacy of the case lives on in every modern crime investigation and detective story we tell, a haunting reminder that even in the quietest villages, dark secrets can reside behind closed doors. Francis Saville Kent's story continues to resonate over a century and a half later. Rhodes, once a place of scandal, is now a quiet corner of history, forever linked to this tragic event. Witcher's legacy is the modern detective, relentless, methodical, and dedicated to the truth. Road Hill House stands still, its walls guarding the memory of that fateful June night. Thank you for exploring this landmark case in British history with us. Stay curious and keep investigating the stories that shaped our world. The Road Hill House murder, a landmark in British criminology.
In the heart of 18th century London, a tragedy unfolded that would shock the nation. Martha Ray, a woman of extraordinary talent and beauty, was the centre of high society intrigue. As the longtime mistress of Lord Sandwich, she navigated the glittering world of the aristocracy. Her voice, a pure soprano, filled the grandest halls, captivating all who heard her. But in the shadows, another was watching, James Hackman, a young clergyman driven by a dangerous devotion. What began as admiration spiraled into a consuming obsession that Hackman could not control. Rejection only fueled his fire, turning love into a desperate, volatile possessiveness. The night of April 7, 1779 began like any other, with a performance at the Royal Opera House. As Martha exited the theatre, she had no idea it would be her final curtain call. Hackman was waiting. He stepped from the shadows, a pistol in each hand. In a single, violent moment, the celebrated soprano was gone, and the streets of London erupted in chaos. Hackman attempted to take his own life, but he was seized by the crowd and delivered to justice. The trial at Old Bailey became a public spectacle, capturing the fascination of all of Georgian England. His defence argued temporary insanity, a plea born of a heart broken by love. But the law was unmoved, the verdict was guilty, and the sentence was death. The murder was quickly transformed into a viral moral warning for the age. It served as a grim reminder of the dangers of unrestrained emotion and illicit desire. Hackman's journey from the pulpit to the gallows was complete. At Tyburn, thousands gathered to witness the final chapter of this tragic obsession. With the drop of a hat, the clergyman who loved too much met his end. Martha Ray was buried in a quiet ceremony, her voice silenced forever. Lord Sandwich, devastated, would never truly recover from the loss of his beloved mistress. The scandal echoed through the halls of power, changing the perception of public morality. It became the definitive cautionary tale, a warning that passion, when left unchecked, leads only to ruin. Long before the internet, this crime of passion went viral through pamphlets and songs. It remains one of the most documented and debated crimes of the Georgian era. Even today, the case of Ray and Hackman serves as a chilling study of the human heart, a story of talent, obsession, and the high price of a love that turned deadly. A reminder that behind the glitter of high society, the darkest shadows often hide.
In the annals of American legal history, one case stands alone, a murder solved by a voice from beyond the grave. This is the story of the Greenbrier Ghost, a haunting tale of justice from the mountains of West Virginia in 1897. It began with a sudden death and a grieving mother who refused to believe her daughter died of natural causes. Elva Zona Heister, known simply as Zona, was a young woman whose life took a tragic turn shortly after her marriage. She had recently married Erasmus Edward Shue, a local blacksmith with a mysterious past. In January 1897, just months after their wedding, Zona was found dead in her home. While the town doctor initially attributed it to everlasting faint, Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heister, suspected foul play. Then the extraordinary happened. Mary Jane claimed that Zona's ghost appeared to her over 4 consecutive nights. The spirit told a chilling story. She hadn't died naturally. She had been strangled by her husband. The ghost revealed a specific detail. Her neck had been broken at the first vertebra. Mary Jane took her story to the local prosecutor, who was initially skeptical but eventually agreed to look closer. Driven by her persistence, authorities ordered Zona's body to be exhumed for a proper autopsy. The examination revealed exactly what the ghost had claimed. Zona's neck had indeed been broken. The windpipe was crushed and there were finger marks on her neck. It was clear. This was murder. Erasmus Shue was immediately arrested and charged with the murder of his wife. The trial took place in Lewisburg, West Virginia, drawing crowds from all over the county. The prosecution focused on the physical evidence found during the autopsy. The defense tried to discredit Mary Jane by highlighting her supernatural visions as the rambling of a grieving mother. But when she took the stand, her unwavering testimony about her daughter's ghost captivated the jury. It became the only case in U.S. history where testimony prompted by a ghost contributed to a murder conviction. After only an hour of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty. Hsu was sentenced to life in prison, though he died just 3 years later from an epidemic. The Greenbrier ghost remains a unique landmark in legal lore, illustrating the intersection of science and belief. In Appalachia, the story has passed into folklore, a legend of a mother's love and a daughter's justice. It serves as a reminder that sometimes the truth cannot be buried, even in death. Today, a roadside marker near Sam Black Church commemorates the case for all who pass by. It stands as a testament to the time a ghost spoke in court and was finally heard. The case continues to inspire books, studies, and stories over a century later. A haunting mystery, a legal anomaly, and a legend that refuses to fade. The Greenbrier Ghost, where justice crossed the veil.
In the heart of 18th century London, a tragedy unfolded that would shock the nation. Martha Ray, a woman of extraordinary talent and beauty, was the centre of high society intrigue. As the longtime mistress of Lord Sandwich, she navigated the glittering world of the aristocracy. Her voice, a pure soprano, filled the grandest halls, captivating all who heard her. But in the shadows, another was watching: James Hackman, a young clergyman driven by a dangerous devotion. What began as admiration spiraled into a consuming obsession that Hackman could not control. Rejection only fueled his fire, turning love into a desperate, volatile possessiveness. The night of April 7th, 1779 began like any other, with a performance at the Royal Opera House. As Martha exited the theatre, she had no idea it would be her final curtain call. Hackman was waiting. He stepped from the shadows, a pistol in each hand. In a single, violent moment, the celebrated soprano was gone, and the streets of London erupted in chaos. Hackman attempted to take his own life, but he was seized by the crowd and delivered to justice. The trial at Old Bailey became a public spectacle, capturing the fascination of all of Georgian England. His defence argued temporary insanity, a plea born of a heart broken by love. But the law was unmoved, the verdict was guilty, and the sentence was death. The murder was quickly transformed into a viral moral warning for the age. It served as a grim reminder of the dangers of unrestrained emotion and illicit desire. Hackman's journey from the pulpit to the gallows was complete. At Tyburn, thousands gathered to witness the final chapter of this tragic obsession. With the drop of a hat, the clergyman who loved too much met his end. Martha Ray was buried in a quiet ceremony, her voice silenced forever. Lord Sandwich, devastated, would never truly recover from the loss of his beloved mistress. The scandal echoed through the halls of power, changing the perception of public morality. It became the definitive cautionary tale, a warning that passion, when left unchecked, leads only to ruin. Long before the internet, this crime of passion went viral through pamphlets and songs. It remains one of the most documented and debated crimes of the Georgian era. Even today, the case of Ray and Hackman serves as a chilling study of the human heart, a story of talent, obsession, and the high price of a love that turned deadly. A reminder that behind the glitter of high society, the darkest shadows often hide.
In the late 19th century, a shadow fell over the growing frontier city of Austin, Texas. A series of brutal, unsolved crimes would soon become known as the Servant Girl Annihilator murders. Between December 1884 and December 1885, Austin was gripped by terror as a serial killer targeted the community. At the time, Austin was a rapidly expanding city, undergoing a period of intense urban and social transformation. The spree began on the night of December 30th, 1884, with the attack on Molly Smith. Over the course of 1 year, 8 people were confirmed killed, primarily Black women working as domestic servants. Most victims were attacked at night within the safety of their homes or the servant quarters where they lived. The attacks were characterized by extreme brutality, involving mutilation and meticulous planning. The killer shared a disturbing pattern, dragging victims outdoors and using sharp weapons with increasing savagery. As the body count rose, a profound sense of panic and helplessness swept through the local community. The crimes exposed deep-seated racial and class tensions that defined the social landscape of the era. Austin's young police force struggled to cope with the unprecedented scale and violence of the spree. Hundreds of suspects were questioned and numerous arrests were made, but conclusive evidence remained elusive. Despite massive efforts and public pressure, not a single person was ever convicted for the murders. The name Servant Girl Annihilator was coined by the press, reportedly by the famous writer O. Henry. Porter was a resident of Austin at the time and observed the city's descent into fear firsthand. Toward the end of 1885, the killer's profile shifted, and 2 white women were also murdered. The death of Eula Phillips on Christmas Eve 1885 marked one of the final and most shocking attacks. That Christmas, instead of celebration, the city was filled with mourning and a desperate hunt for the killer. Then, just as abruptly as they had started, the murders ceased in late December 1885. Some have speculated about a link to Jack the Ripper, who would terrorize London just 3 years later. While theories of a shared identity persist, no definitive evidence has ever linked the 2 cases. The investigation was hampered by the limited forensic methods available to 19th-century law enforcement. The case represents one of the earliest examples of mass media coverage surrounding a serial killer in America. Today, the Servant Girl Annihilator murders remain a significant part of Texas folklore and criminal history. They continue to be the subject of intense study by historians and criminologists alike. The mystery endures as one of the first recorded instances of a serial killer on American soil. The identity of the Annihilator remains unknown, leaving a chilling void in the history of the frontier. While the city moved on, the legacy of that terrifying year is never truly forgotten. Thank you for exploring this dark chapter of history with us.
The 1860 Road Hill House murder was a crime that shocked Victorian Britain and changed the face of detective work forever. It began in the quiet village of Road, Wiltshire, at the home of the respectable Kent family. The Kents were a large family, living under the shadow of domestic tensions that were about to explode. On the morning of June 30th, 1860, the family woke to find 3-year-old Francis Saville Kent missing. His body was soon discovered, brutally murdered, and hidden in an outdoor privy on the grounds. The local police were overwhelmed, struggling to solve the crime amidst intense national press scrutiny. Scotland Yard dispatched Detective Inspector Jonathan Witcher, one of its first plainclothes investigators. Witcher's instincts quickly led him to 16-year-old Constance Kent, the victim's half-sister. He suspected she had disposed of a blood-stained nightdress to hide her involvement. But the public was outraged. To suspect a respectable young lady was seen as a violation of Victorian moral order. With insufficient evidence, the case against Constance collapsed, and Witcher's career was left in ruins. 5 years passed, and the mystery of Road Hill House seemed destined to remain unsolved. Then, in 1865, Constance Kent unexpectedly confessed to the murder while living in a religious home. She claimed her motive was jealousy and resentment towards her stepmother and half-brother. Constance was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment, finally closing the legal chapter of the case. While her confession was debated, it eventually vindicated Witcher's original investigative theory. The case inspired literary classics like Wilkie Collins's The Moonstone, often called the first modern detective novel. It spurred the professionalization of criminal investigation, highlighting the need for methodical detective work. The murder exposed deep-seated Victorian anxieties about domestic secrets and the fragility of middle-class morality. Today, the Road Hill House murder remains a landmark in British criminology and a subject of endless fascination. It challenged the way society viewed justice, class, and the hidden lives within the family home. The legacy of the case lives on in every modern crime investigation and detective story we tell, a haunting reminder that even in the quietest villages, dark secrets can reside behind closed doors. Francis Saville Kent's story continues to resonate over a century and a half later. Road, once a place of scandal, is now a quiet corner of history, forever linked to this tragic event. Witcher's legacy is the modern detective, relentless, methodical, and dedicated to the truth. Road Hill House stands still, its walls guarding the memory of that fateful June night. Thank you for exploring this landmark case in British history with us. Stay curious and keep investigating the stories that shaped our world. The Road Hill House murder, a landmark in British criminology.
In the winter of 2004, a young woman crashed her car on a remote New Hampshire road. What followed remains one of the most baffling mysteries in American history. 7 minutes. That was the window. By the time police arrived, she was gone. No tracks, no clues, no trace. Maura Murray was a 21-year-old nursing student with everything ahead of her. But in the days leading up to February 9th, her behavior turned erratic. She told her professors there was a death in the family, a lie. She packed her bags, withdrew nearly all her money, and headed north. After stopping at an ATM and a liquor store, Maura made one final call to her voicemail. It was the last time anyone heard her voice. She drove nearly 150 miles into the White Mountains. For reasons we still don't understand, she was headed deep into the cold. Around 7:27 p.m., she hit a sharp bend in Haverhill, New Hampshire. Her Saturn sedan spun out and slammed into a snowbank. The impact was heavy. The airbags deployed, and the car was disabled. Maura was trapped in a dead zone with no cell service. This is where the timeline narrows. A local resident hears the crash and calls 911. The clock starts ticking. A passing driver, known as Witness A,
Some mysteries are born in the shadows, but this one began in a YouTube comment section. Meet Kenny Veach, an experienced hiker who loved the solitude of the Nevada desert. In 2014, Kenny posted a comment that would eventually lead to his disappearance. He claimed to have found a strange M-shaped cave near Area 51. But it wasn't just the shape that was strange. It was the feeling. Kenny said that as he got closer, his entire body began to vibrate with fear. He was so overcome with dread that he turned and fled, unable to enter. The internet didn't believe him. They called him a hoaxer, a storyteller. So, Kenny decided to prove them wrong. He set out to find the M cave again. His second attempt was documented on video, but he couldn't find the entrance. On November 10th, 2014, Kenny told his family he was going for a short hike. He didn't take much, no GPS, just his camera and a 9mm handgun. That was the last time anyone saw Kenny Veach alive. He never returned. Search parties combed the rugged terrain for weeks, looking for any sign. The area is notorious for abandoned mines and treacherous drop-offs. Then a breakthrough. Searchers found his cell phone. It was sitting right at the edge of an abandoned vertical mine shaft. Authorities searched the shaft but found nothing. No Kenny, no equipment. He had seemingly vanished into thin air, leaving only questions behind. Some believe he simply succumbed to the elements or had a fatal fall. Others point to the proximity to Area 51, suggesting he saw something he shouldn't have. And then there's the cave itself. Was the vibration a warning? Kenny's own words described a physical terror so intense it was visceral. It feels like a real-life horror movie because we have his records of the dread. The desert is a place that keeps its secrets well hidden. Kenny's story has become a legend in the world of internet mysteries. To this day, amateur sleuths still head into the desert searching for the M Cave. But most return empty-handed, and perhaps that's for the best. Because if the M Cave really does exist, it clearly doesn't want to be found. The search for answers continues, but the desert keeps its peace. What really happened to Kenny Veach? That's a question only the Nevada winds can answer. Stay curious, stay safe, and respect the mysteries of the wild.